third pillar in the European Union. There's increasing cooperation in police matters. That includes also intelligence matters, by the way. There's Europol, which I'm sure you've heard of. Eurojust, which is the judicial cooperation system. Eurodac, which in itself is quite interesting as an example, I'll come to it in a minute. There's the Schengen Information System, which again is a very useful example of a particular development. I'll come to it. There's the criminal intelligence system, and there's the recent primitive. What's happening is that all of these were established for very defined purposes. Schengen in particular was established between a limited number of countries to compensate for the Benelux and Germany and France, to compensate for the abolition of the borders. Because we abolish the borders, we have to give our police forces more information on each other. It never had an operational role. Europol never had an operational role as being proposed and is given. The Schengen Information System is being massively extended to something called SIS2, the Schengen Information System number 2. And it's going to be sharing a platform with the visa integration, the visa data. That's data on people who want to enter the European Union. The developments have been criticized, I have to jump a little bit through, on two particular bases. These ones. Policy laundering and function creep. Two nice terms. Both, I think, launched, especially used by an organization called Statewatch. Excellent organization. www.statewatch.org. Very good. The best analysis of third pillar European stuff that you can produce. And much better than anything I can do, but I'm not really an EU EC lawyer. Policy laundering is a particular trick that governments use, and increasingly use. That means that if there are particular policies that they know they will not be able to get through their own parliament, instead they moot it in Europe, they discuss it in secret in the council, they come up with a proposal without any prior discussion. They then say, this is the proposal that we have agreed, they all go back to their own parliament, and if anybody objects, they say, sorry, that's what we've agreed, you can't change it anymore. Take it or leave it. And since everybody wants to have European cooperation, most parliaments then say, oh, all right, we'll accept it. It is a denial of democratic accountability. It really is a serious flaw in the European setup. There are more in the third pillar, but this is one of the most important parts. The House of Lords did a very good inquiry into the Schengen Information System, which I mentioned earlier, and mentioned it as one particular example in which this was used. Other measures and came up with some very good proposals. What you have in the United Kingdom, the government wants to introduce a law. It first has to issue a green paper, then a white paper, and then a draft, and then it gets discussed. The green paper is for general discussion, the white paper is for detailed discussion, and then you get the discussion in committee, and then you get the committee on the floor of the House of Commons. You get an extensive debate on the pros and cons, and civil society can feed into these things. What happens at the European level is quite the opposite. There is no serious debate, civil society is not able to comment, the national parliaments are bypassed, and it is an absolute denial of the most basic principles of democratic lawmaking. And these serious matters that we've been talking about are all decided in that particular way. Yeah? There's even a suggestion that issues on police cooperation with third states, particularly the United States, which is a big problem, should be moved to the second pillar when the European Parliament even would have less influence over it. It is a tendency by the governments to do this, and it is, to me, as a good European, one of the things that really undermines the respect I have for the European institutions. The other thing is function creep. You set the system up for a very limited purpose, and then you start adding purposes to it. Eurodac is the best one. Eurodac was set up to keep track of failed asylum seekers. It often happens, somebody comes into the country, applies for asylum, gets rejected as asylum, goes out of the country, gets back in somewhere else, and starts all over again. And the whole purpose was to identify those people and say, no, you've already been rejected. What, of course, is especially in the fight against terrorism, the new proposal is to use all the Eurodac data for criminal intelligence and criminal prosecution investigation purposes as well. The typical example of function creep. And a third, Schengen and Prüm are good examples of it, is when a small group of states comes up with an arrangement that they're happy with. They adopt that arrangement, Schengen, Prüm, and then later on other states are invited to join and urged by the Commission to join. And again, they are invited to join on a take it or leave it basis. Take it as it is, you can't change the arrangement because they've already been agreed by these startup states, if you like. Again, it bypasses serious political control at the European level. Now, the European Council, I said earlier, one of the fundamental principles that you have to have in police cooperation is data protection. There is a, not ideal, but certainly in its principles, fairly decent EC directive on data protection. Sets a high level of data protection standards for all matters in the first pillar, all economic matters, right? Including a high standard for data protection on the exchange of data with third countries like the United States, in particular, other non-European countries. One way of doing something about all these problems that I'm talking about would be to have a similarly high level of data protection in the third pillar. Not only is that a good idea, it is a constitutional requirement. Data protection is in the EU Charter as a separate sui generis right. It's a separate right. It's not just a privacy right, but a right in its own protection. Because, as I said, it's not just about invasion of privacy, but about who controls you through your data. And therefore it was proposed that the Council would come up with a framework decision on data protection in the third pillar. Well, they have, and it is lousy. It has been criticized by absolutely everybody who has any sense of data protection or of human rights. It has been criticized by the European Data Protection Supervisor, Hustings, who used to be the Data Protection Commissioner here, of course, and the Registratiekamer. It's been criticized by the data protection authorities at our meeting in Cyprus in April. It's been criticized by Statewatch, Privacy International, by anybody who knows anything about these issues. It is terrible. I've made a special little handout, which I pilfered for something else that I'm writing that you're not allowed to know about yet, but I'll let you know about it when I finish it. Everybody is criticized as not meeting the most basic requirements. It doesn't deal with data protection at the national level. Very serious fault, because it means that if data are sent from Germany, where you have a high level of protection, to the United Kingdom, where you have a lousy level of protection, it will basically lose its protection. Which means you're creating a loophole through which data can be circulated. The Germans send it to the UK, in the UK it goes to everybody, and then they can pick it up from everybody again. It doesn't apply, worst of all things in the war against terror, to data processing of data relating to intelligence matters, either by the intelligence services or by the police working in cooperation with them. That is worse than a loophole. That is, as you say in English, driving a coach and horses through the whole thing. You might as well tear it up for what it was. And even if you take it on the limited areas where it still applies, it doesn't guarantee a high level of protection when data are sent to third countries. Read the United States. It doesn't guarantee adequate principal limitation. In other words, if the data are not going to be abused for another purpose that they weren't intended for. It doesn't adequately protect sensitive data, that is data on race, religion, sexual orientation, things like that. The thing is an absolute disgrace. I'm very happy to be quoted on it. Yeah? It's an absolute scandal that the Council even dares to put something forward like that and at the same time talk about protecting human rights in the European Union. You can't have it both ways. Please read the handout on that for detail. So that's data transfers to non-EU countries general. It's basically the United States that we're interested in, so let's talk about that very briefly. The United States, after 9/11, adopted a law which required all airlines to pass on data on their passengers to the United States before the airline, before the people would show up, some hours in advance. They also demanded this, of course, of European airlines. That clearly